Welcome to ciplantgo, a podcast aimed at introducing people living a plant-based lifestyle in Japan. For this episode, I discussed with Darcy Kishida, a Hawaii-born US lawyer living in Tokyo since 2010. The first time Darcy and I met was in the context of my teacher job. His children are currently attending the school I work at. Us introducing each other as vegans happened the second time we met though, at a Tokyo Vegan Meetup picnic. Darcy is one of the Meetup's most ancient members, having attended the monthly Pink Cow gatherings for about 5 years, at a time when that was the only event organized. His origins, job, family situation, and experience within the plant-based community makes Darcy a very interesting person to talk with, and I was really glad he accepted to be one of ciplantgo's first guests. This episode of the podcast is a bit different than previous ones, in that it is more a discussion than an interview. Darcy expressed his preference for the former, and I happily agreed on making our couple of hours together an exchange of points of views. Our conversations covers a wide range of topics. Why I chose ciplantgo as a name for my podcast, when and in which contexts I went vegan, Darcy's background and path to veganism, his take on how to be his family's only vegan, factory farming in Japan, the difference between veganism and religion, the importance of always keeping an open mind, everything health related, where to draw the line in not killing animals, the relation between ethics and feelings, the matter of suffering, and finally Darcy's favorite eating out spots in town. I enjoyed every bit of my discussion with Darcy, and I'm sure he will be back on the show in the future. I hope you will find our conversation interesting as well. Without further ado, here is Darcy Kishida. Welcome to ciplantgo, my podcast. Can you give us...
What's it called?
Ciplantgo.
Ciplantgo. What language is that?
Oh, it's a mix of ciplantgo, which is an old name for Japan. Apparently,
right.
It was used by Marco Polo the first time. I think it comes from China in the first place, one of the ways to pronounce Japan. And then I put plant in the middle, so it became ciplantgo.
That's clever.
I debated this one or something like japan&plantbased, right? But I love the ciplantgo better because I used to be a Japanese history geek, so I have that knowledge already. And also I like when it's not too obvious.
Right.
But I still present it like on my Instagram page, for example. It's written clearly what it means. Plus you have plant go plants or whatever, I don't know. So yeah, it's named ciplantgo, and so welcome. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah, sure. So just for a bit of background history for the listeners, your son is actually in the school I work at.
Correct.
And we found that out when I attended for the first time Tokyo Vegan Meetup. It was last April, something like that, or March, and we actually had met before.
Right. At the race.
At the running, since I'm doing cross-country coaching, and you used to run yourself.
Right.
And so I'm coaching for your son.
And do you know what I remember about that first meeting?
Tell me.
We were talking about running, and I said, "Oh, so do you do road races?" And you specifically said, "I do not run for racing."
Yeah. I remember that very well. Yeah.
And you were very clear about that.
Yeah, I run for self-achievement and self-improvement, and that's partly why I stopped for the longest time running, because I wasn't finding what I was looking for anymore. And I know you were only running for racing.
Correct.
Yeah.
In high school.
Yeah, and I remember very vividly you telling me you hated training, but...
I still do. But I still run, and it's for health.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. And so your son runs as well. I actually never asked him what he liked in running. Do you know what he likes in running?
I'm not sure. I think he's similar to me in that he's got this no pain, no gain personality.
Okay, yeah.
So if it's too easy, it doesn't feel like it's beneficial. That's definitely how I am.
Okay.
When I go to the gym or when I run, if it's too easy, I feel like I'm wasting my time.
Okay.
So I crank up the machine, I lift more weights. Whereas I feel like some other people, I don't know, they go to the gym, they look like they're taking it easy, going through the motions.
It happens to me when I train sometimes, like, okay, I need to do this. But yeah, sometimes, I mean, I tend to put a lot of pressure on myself overall. So sometimes for the one training, I don't go 100%. And I'm aware of that. And I think I decided to be okay with that, as long as, especially since like you now, I'm just like basically doing that for health. I don't mind improving, totally not. But as long as it's health, it's really the reason here. And so we met at that race, and a few weeks probably later, I decided to attend the first Tokyo Vegan Meetup ever, as far as I'm concerned. It was a picnic in Kiba Park, and I had never met anyone there, but then I see you, and like we start talking, and you start asking me tons of questions, one leading to another. And as I do usually, I start talking, I don't stop. And yeah, it was an interesting second encounter.
I think you were not vegan at the time.
I was.
Oh, you were? Okay.
I was. So I went vegan by heart in September and August, early September 2017, and then I was vegan at home and vegetarian outside, like socially. And then I think I don't have that exactly. I think my last consciously non-vegan food or whatever was around New Year, the 31st of January, something like that, because at the time I was like traveling with my ex, and it was still the same rule, but I felt less and less happy with it. And so I had some food there, but I think we did I think I did the 31st of January, the dinner and all, vegetarian.
The rule you're talking about is when you travel?
No, it was like even in Japan, because all my friends at the time, but for the vegetarian friend I talked to you about, were omnivores. Mm-hmm. And obviously my ex was and still is, and it wasn't. Yeah, I was not yet used to a lot of things vegan in the way I was eating, etc. And yeah, I think social context played a big role, and also I was still like parsing a lot of the information in my head and feelings. So I ended up deciding on the 1st of January to just go full vegan, and since then I've been vegan since then, totally. And I was aware of the Tokyo Vegan Meetup. I didn't know how much I would like the people there. I basically used Facebook to type Tokyo vegan, Tokyo vegetarian. I found a bunch of groups, and gradually my feed started like being full of news, of events, of blah blah, and I was like, okay, I'm leaving that on the side for now. I'm just having a look at it. And at some point in my life, for a lot of reasons, a few months later, I just was like, okay, well, I'm gonna invest now and go and see what. I think the reason was like, at first, I was already dancing frequently, so going to Roppongi, etc. But I wasn't planning on spending 2,500 yen for a meetup in Roppongi at the Pink Cow without. For me, it was not like it's a lot of money, but I didn't know how much I would enjoy it. And so it didn't make enough, like I didn't feel like it was enough potential value maybe. And so when it happened to be free and just next door to where I was living, it was a no-brainer. And that's how I went to the park. And from there on, I just attended all the meetups.
Well, you're one of the regulars now.
Yeah. To the point I'm asked to host some events sometimes. Yeah. So that was an interesting story. And when we met, we talked a lot. So you told me, how long have you been vegan now?
About 2 years and a half. So just as background, I'm probably the least likely person ever to become vegan.
Yeah.
Because as a child, I mean, if you ask anybody.
And by the way, speaking of background, we're doing everything reverse here so far. I'm talking, you're not, and I haven't asked you. I I think I know some of it, but speaking of background and you as a child, where was that and where did you come from and what are you doing here?
So I'm originally from Honolulu, Hawaii.
All right.
I am Japanese American, 4th generation. My great grandparents left Japan at some point, about 110 years ago.
Okay.
And went to Hawaii.
All right.
And my family just stayed. And I came to Japan for the first time in 1989 to go to Sophia University.
All right.
Then I left in 98 to go to law school in Hawaii.
Yep.
And I graduated, became a lawyer in 2001, worked as a lawyer for 9 years, came back to Japan 8 years ago in 2010.
Yeah.
And working at a law firm here now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you were to ask anybody in my family when I was a child, who's the pickiest eater you know, they all would have named me.
Okay.
I mean, it was so bad that there was, we have this thing called saimin in Hawaii, which is basically the local Hawaii version of ramen.
Okay.
And you know, there's green onions inside.
Yeah.
I would pick out all of the green onion because anything vegetable was just no.
Okay.
I had this aversion.
Do you know where that came from?
I don't. My mother is very, very picky about food. And I hear that there's a connection sometimes between what your mother is eating or not eating. If she has a very plain diet when you're in the womb, that can...
Yeah, definitely there's influences there, but to what extent?
So I was known as the meat eater. I would eat meat and rice and bread, you know, like pizza, burgers, steak. And I was like that for basically like 40 years. I mean, until I was about 40. And then I met this guy. He was one of the smartest people I've ever met, much younger than me.
Is that diet, has that diet because you were pretty active, right? So you were running when you were like what, in high school?
14 through 18, yeah.
Okay. And after that you kept on being active?
Less active, but yeah, still active.
All right. Did you get any kind of negative effects that now you think you can associate to your diet, whether it was medical or just like how you felt? And also, did you get any kind of like warnings from professionals upon like blood tests or stuff like that? Or was it like just you were eating that and you don't see any really negative effects?
I can't say I felt any obvious negative effects. Now it's hard to say because I always had that diet.
Yeah.
So how I was feeling seemed normal to me.
Yeah.
Now, if I switched back to that diet from now, maybe I would notice a difference. Plus, I was a lot younger.
Yeah, there's that, right? So there's no really way to know, actually.
Right. Well, I mean, in terms of objectively measurable, you know, like cholesterol level and stuff, I was fine.
Which is already pretty like rare, or I'd say like fortunate, because if you really ate the way you described it, it wouldn't be surprising if your blood work was all over the place and cholesterol was over the roof.
Yeah, I mean, on the plus side, I've always been conscious of my weight.
Okay.
So I didn't overeat.
I see. Yeah.
And I exercised. So those two things I had in my favor. But yeah, it was so, you know, I mean, as you know, I'm not vegan for health reasons. So it wasn't something like, oh, my doctor said, oh, you gotta cut down on this or that. So a friend of mine, who's he's a philosophy major.
I know those.
Yes. We had many long discussions about eating and veganism, and he came to the conclusion at a very young age, I mean like 21, that he could not live an ethical life and continue to eat animals.
I see.
And my position at the time was I didn't disagree with him.
Okay.
I said, yeah, I think that's a great position. I can't follow you. I'm not strong enough. I love meat too much. And he said, that's fine. But at some point, I think it was maybe a year or so after we started talking about it, I remember I was still working in Hawaii. I was at my desk, and a switch got flipped in my head. And I said, I think maybe I'll try to give up meat.
Huh.
And I went home and I told my wife, I said, I think I'm gonna not eat meat anymore. And she could not believe it.
Yeah.
Because by that time she had known me for 16 years.
Okay.
And I was known as the meat eater.
Yeah.
And now, of course, I wasn't vegan. I still ate fish. I was pescatarian, basically.
Okay.
So I still ate fish, still ate dairy, I still ate eggs, but no more meat.
Yeah. And so when was that? Do you have?
That was 2009. I think.
All right.
And that was obviously a major shift for me. And I can't really explain why. I mean, I think I don't know, maybe everybody likes to think this, but I think for me, I don't like the discrepancy between what I believe and what I do.
Oh yeah.
Nobody likes that, I know, but
no one likes to look at it.
Right.
But it's not possible to live totally without that kind of cognitive dissonance, and not only about food, obviously. But I totally agree with that because I'm really the same in that regard. I have the hardest time not being honest to a certain extent, like with myself. And I'm sure I'm not 100% honest with myself, but as far as I can tell, I'm not aware of the parts I'm not honest with myself, so it still worries. But for that, at some point, like you, I don't remember what made the crack in the wall between knowledge and kind of ethics or feelings, but at some point it happened, and you just like you can't really close it anymore, and it just keeps on growing, and one day it just kind of switches.
What blows me away is I meet I don't know if a lot of people, I meet some people that tell me, oh, I used to be vegan.
Yeah.
And it didn't last. And that puzzles me because the longer I'm vegan, the harder it is for me to imagine not being vegan.
Yeah.
So I wonder what drove those people to be vegan.
True.
Like, is it that it was this trendy thing that all their friends were doing in college, so I'll try it too, but they didn't really believe in it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think that might be the case, because I heard that is the fastest growing trend diet-wise in 2018, and I guess it depends on where in the world you're talking about, but I could see how people, the more widespread it's going to be, there's going to be probably two different kinds of people going that way. It's going to be making the choices much more easy to make because of like food availability, etc. And along the way, if people are like really growing up or living a long time enough in that kind of easy to live environment, it will be, you won't really see people going back, I guess, that much. But for people who just follow trends, it requires a lot of, let's say, strength of character to go against the norm, whether it's diet or something else, right? And it's definitely not something that you can do, that everyone can do at any point of their life. I don't think I could have been doing this 10 or 15 years ago the same way I did it now, because you have to be in a place in your life where you have enough leeway, like from choose your battles, right? And you can't take on the world of eating and go against the norm, especially in Japan, right, where it's very uncommon, without that kind of tank full of energy. And that energy can be like because you just have a great life already, or just because of demon that habits you or whatever, right? But you can't be just the average guy and then be like all of a sudden on fire for the cause and then switch back, right?
It's very important to be comfortable being unusual.
Yeah.
And I think I am. I mean, I don't think it's apparent when you just meet me, but I'm very different from most of my family in Hawaii and a lot of people I grew up with.
Huh. How so?
In Hawaii is geographically between Asia and the United States, and also culturally in a large part because there's a large Asian population there.
Yeah.
And in Hawaii, I think it's kind of like Japan, where it's not good to rock the boat. Let's just keep everything steady. Don't
make waves.
Yeah. And I don't know. I've always felt a little bit of an outsider in Hawaii.
Huh.
So I love going there and visiting, but a lot of local Japanese guys, as we call ourselves, as opposed to Japanese guys in Japan. I feel like I don't really fit in to that group sometimes. Like for example, I'm American, and most American guys, they love football, American football. They love basketball. They love baseball. They like watching sports. I don't like any of that stuff.
Oh, really? Is that always been the case, or?
Yeah. And so I felt very out of place in school because all my friends would be talking about it. They'd be like, "What's wrong with you? How come you didn't watch the game last night?"
And what was your thing then?
Oh, I liked movies. Reading.
All right.
TV. Video games.
I see.
That sort of thing. So I often felt out of place, I think.
I see.
So for me, this is not that different. I think once you get used to feeling out of place, it's not such a huge leap to then, apply it to other areas of your life.
Yeah, true. That's true. I think you're right there. Okay, and so you go vegetarian around 2000. You told me 9. How did your diet change, like, concretely? Like, instead of meat, so you used to have like a lot of meat, rice, bread, and that kind of thing. And so if you remove the meat, did you get fish instead in quite the same quantities, or?
Yeah, it's hard to remember now. It was fish. It was a lot of probably pizza, because I just get the pizza without the pepperoni or the Italian sausage. I think you're right. It was a lot of fish and pizza and just whatever. I mean, it was pretty easy. I mean, especially now from my vantage point now.
Being vegetarian is so easy. And pescatarian, don't talk about it.
Yeah.
How easy it must be.
Yeah. So and then even when I moved here, because this happened in Hawaii, then I moved here, it was still pretty easy. I mean, you get the shrimp, right? You get the fish, you get the pizza, you get the doria, you get the gratin. It's pretty easy.
All right. And what? So you don't really remember what happened in the back of your mind or your subconscious between being omnivore with a love of meat and becoming pescatarian. But do you remember some of the mindset you had that was yours when, after a short while or a longer while, you're pescatarian, and how do you see yourself? How do you see your diet in comparison with that discussion you had with that friend who pushed you towards that diet? Were you like happy with the way things were, or like, oh, I'm more convinced but not enough, but for now it's good? Or do you remember any of this?
You mean being pescatarian and not vegan? Or you mean being pescatarian compared to the previous diet I had?
Yeah, so, well, there's several layers here, but from an ethical, moral kind of walking the talk kind of thing, right? Were you thinking you're doing what's best available for what you believed in? Were you like doing what you thought was best, or were you aware there was a lot of ways you could do better, but that was it for now?
I think I looked at it as I'm doing the best I can at the moment.
Okay.
I went from this horrible, very heavy meat-based diet to cutting it out completely.
Yeah.
And I thought that's a huge step.
Oh, definitely.
And I'm quite happy with that.
Great.
I don't think I felt, okay, so that's part of it. So is that I already took this big step. But the other thing, of course, is the reason why I think a lot of people are pescatarian and not vegan is you create a hierarchy.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so in my mind, and again, this is not saying it's correct, but in my mind, cows, pigs, chickens are factory farmed. They're bred specifically to be slaughtered for meat, or and there's this directness of eating the flesh of an animal, right? Which is just instinctively, I think, different from eating an egg.
Yeah, no, totally right.
Or drinking milk.
Yeah,
right? So that direct connection with like this is the flesh of an animal made it very clear that was not okay, and then the hierarchy. So in my mind, I know some fish are farmed, especially salmon. I believed, rightly or wrongly, that a lot of fish are not farmed. They're just swimming in the ocean. They live like all fish do, and then they're caught, and then they suffer, but not as much as
factory farmed animals,
chickens, pigs, and cows, right? And and of course with the eggs and the dairy, it's like, well, cows they're not slaughtered for milk. Chickens are not slaughtered for eggs, so it should be okay. Yeah, that was my mindset.
I see. And so that was still the case in Japan. How long did you keep on that diet? Do you remember?
Yeah, that was basically until I became vegan.
Okay.
Which was 2.5 years ago. And actually, I had I don't know if we were recording already, but you talked about the exception. So I had my own exception to So on my birthday.
Oh, you would have meat?
I would have a thick steak.
Oh,
on my
how
birthday.
did you feel about that at the time?
Again, I think I felt I'm doing 364 days out of the year. I'm doing a great job, so I'm gonna treat myself to this thing that I deny myself.
I see.
The rest of the year.
I see. Was it kind of tasting, not the taste itself, but was there any part of you that didn't like you doing that?
I think there was, but it was not a problem actually.
Okay.
Yeah, it was not a problem. I mean, this is typically, my birthday's in the summer, and I go back to Hawaii in the summer. So I was with my family, and I would say, hey, we're going to a steakhouse tonight, and I would eat my steak, and then the next day I'd go back.
I see.
Now the last time I did that was, well, 3 years ago or so.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't do that now.
All right.
So the reason I went vegan is, somebody that and you've already interviewed, which is Nadia.
Okay.
So we're talking at one of the vegan meetups.
Can you tell us, us, I'm putting the listeners here too, but when did you start attending those meetups, by the way?
That was
a long time ago,
4 or 5 years ago.
Okay, yeah.
Pretty long ago.
I don't know why I remember the longer.
Before I was vegan.
Okay. What brought you there?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember. I honestly don't remember. But I'll just tell the story of.
Go ahead.
So Nadia and
Yeah.
I have a connection in that regard. So the first one I ever attended, you know Nadia, she's tall, she's blonde, she's quite striking, right? So I was walking from Roppongi Station to the Pink Cow, and I saw this tall blonde woman in front of me.
Okay.
And I was very nervous because I didn't know a single person at the meetup. And I saw her and I thought, I wonder if she's going to the meetup. And so we kept walking, and of course, we ended up at the Pink Cow. And we were, back then it was really crowded because there weren't as many meetups back then. So you get like 80, sometimes 90 people at one event. It was packed, right? So we were waiting in line for our food, and we started talking. I said, I told her, I saw you walking here, and I was wondering if you were going to be at the meetup, and you were, and hello, and we started talking. And she said that she had been to a meetup about a year earlier, and she did not have a good time.
Yeah, she told me that as well.
Yeah. And then, but because I was so friendly and talkative, I put her at ease, and we put each other at ease. And then ever since then, we've both been regulars at the meetups. And now, of course, Nadia's the
organizer.
co-host. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But anyway, about 2.5 years ago, Nadia, I forget why, but we're talking about it, and she said, if you're still not vegan, you should try reading this book called Mind If I Order the Cheeseburger.
Yeah.
Written by an American lawyer, female lawyer.
I see.
And that pretty much addressed all the issues of eggs, like why eating eggs is not an ethical thing, or milk and fish. And so I read that book, and you probably can relate. There was this moment where you're like, I probably can't go back to the way I was. That's when it started. And that's it. No more exceptions.
Only
much.
vegetables.
Okay, you know what? I have to say on a podcast
Go ahead.
I guess I'm not full vegan because I do eat honey sometimes.
No, well, wait, because honey, I mean, I'm not eating honey, but I think I remember, so I read this book that's about the history of the vegan society. It's a very short book. And I think that in this book, or I read it somewhere else, anyways, it talks about how at first about honey, the vegan society, the definition of veganism that they give was leaving honey to the discretion of the people. Right. Now it's not the case anymore. Plus, I would argue that, I mean, I'm not eating honey nor any substitute, so people who really love honey and the variety of honey and blah, 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 they might not agree with this, but you can easily replace a lot of use of honey with like agave syrup or maple syrup, etc., right? And if you look in depth into how honey is made, I'm pretty sure you will disagree with quite a bit of the methods there. Then again, where do you draw the line, right? Insects, not insects, and etc. It's complicated, but yeah, I think most people will say that people who eat honey thinking it's okay, are not vegan. But for example, a very concrete scenario. If my girlfriend was vegan, but for that, I wouldn't make a mountain out of it, right? It's not like, I'm only eating eggs, right? It's a total different level to me. It doesn't mean I wouldn't try to discuss the thing and see where she stands, really. But why are you eating honey then?
Why?
Why?
Well, okay. Well, let me clarify. I don't seek it out.
Yeah.
If it's the reason this came up was there's a restaurant near here called Sasaya. Have you been there?
Sasaya.
In Kinchicho?
No, you talked about it. I haven't been there yet.
Right. So on the app Happy Cow, it's they label restaurants vegan, vegetarian, or whatever vegan options. Yeah. So it's not labeled as
vegan.
Vegan, and it said in the write-up, it said because they serve honey.
Okay.
And I thought, I didn't even think about that. So yeah, I mean, I'm at the point where if somebody tells me, oh, there's honey in here, I still also eat it, but I won't go in. Oh, I'm gonna cook stuff with honey.
All right, but if you have the choice of like, you're not buying it yourself, basically.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So I can see where you stand there. All right, and so you discussed with Nadia. You read that book, and it addresses all the questions you might have had still about eggs, fish, dairy.
Right.
What happens to your diet the next day? What do you eat?
Yeah. Yeah. So my wife was in for another shock.
Okay.
Yeah, because as we discussed earlier, it's one thing to be pescatarian. It's a completely different thing to be vegan, especially here.
Yes.
Although it's getting better here. To be honest, I don't remember. But I mean, I just started reading labels very carefully. My kanji is quite good now with reading, labels for checking for dairy, eggs, that sort of thing. I went to the convenience stores, and because when I for lunch when I'm working, I basically get convenience store food. So basically, it's yuba, tofu, edamame, pineapple, quinoa, and basically every shop I go to, I know what's vegan.
Okay.
And I make a meal out of that, and that's what I eat every day.
Okay. That's at work then, but at home, I think you're not cooking, right?
I rarely cook.
Okay, so it's your wife who's cooking.
Right. So my wife will make either she'll make it vegan or she'll make my part first and add the non-vegan stuff in later.
Okay.
As maybe you can imagine, my wife's not vegan, first of all. She's not even vegetarian.
Okay.
And she believes that especially children need animal products
to be healthy. Okay.
Yes.
So this is one topic I really was looking forward to address, because I remember that our conversation in Kiba Park, the first time we discussed in length, and was about a lot of things, but among others, you told me that your wife, who I think was in the vicinity at the time, was not vegan, and me, I think. Yeah, I was still with my ex at the time, who's not vegan, and
the lawyer.
Yes.
Right.
And we've had philosophy major and lawyer. That makes for conversations that you remember. And plus she had before knowing me vegan friends in the States, and so she knew about it. She had her position about it. It's still the same, I think. And so me being very new vegan, emotional about it, more than what's needed to convey messages in a peaceful manner, I wasn't the best advocate for the cause, really not. And anyways, for me, hearing from someone who had been vegan longer than me, who was married, who had kids, and your wife not being vegan, I was very curious to know more about this. But I also realized it can be uncomfortable for the person who's vegan to face like that part of their life and talk about it, because personally me, I feel like it's kind of not being able to share those common values with someone, and when it happens way later, like when you're already married, etc. It's different than when you choose to start dating someone who's
That's
vegan.
a great, because I've thought the same thing. I thought, wow, what if I was single? Would I limit my dating options to vegans?
I'm there.
Right? And so you're living that.
I am.
And
in Japan, it's not the easiest choice to do.
So I've thought about it in the reverse. I'm totally comfortable talking about it. So you
all right, it's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's not. There's no problem.
All right. So can you tell me what, if you probably try to share your thoughts and feelings to some extent at some point, right? was the process there? What kind of reaction did you get? And when did you, to put it in a bit negative sounding words, but when did you stop trying? And why? If you did.
Well, okay. Just for starters, I never ever actively tried to make my wife go vegan. Okay. So that's, if you take that out, that simplifies things.
Okay, yeah,
right?
sure.
So I just basically lead by example.
That's great.
Right? I because I know that had somebody pressured me to go vegan when I wasn't vegan, it would have backfired.
Yeah, but still you had that friend who talked with you, right? So he didn't try to make you vegan, but he still presented you with his view of things. And so did you do the same thing?
No, I do it all the time.
Okay, well, that's what I mean by trying to make her vegan. It's not like...
Well, it's not actively trying to, it's just simply, it's like having conversations.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. It's almost like with the assumption is she won't go vegan. So I just talk to her about, just like I would anything else.
Okay.
Right? Like what's on my mind.
All right.
And I'm always thinking about this issue. So it's often on my mind.
Okay.
And I just tell her, I was thinking about this issue about veganism, blah, blah, blah. And she'll listen to me. The one time we did have an argument about it was I said, look, I'm not trying to make you vegan, but you should know where your food's coming from.
Yeah.
So you should try to watch this video just so you know. And if you still decide I don't want to be vegan, like great, and she's like, no, I won't watch it. And I said, you won't watch it because you'll feel guilty after watching it and it'll challenge your value system. And she denied that. And she said, no, I just don't like to see animals suffering, and I just don't like to see horrible things, just like I don't want to watch a horror movie. And just as the same as I don't want to watch a horror movie, I don't want to watch these undercover videos of slaughterhouses. And I said, I think it's mostly you're going to feel guilty. That's that. And then she got quite upset. So we had an argument about that. That was the one. Well, and sometimes she'll. I think she gets a little tired of hearing me talk about veganism. Even though I'm not trying to change her. Not actively trying to change her. If she did go vegan, it'd be great. But she clings to the belief that it is not unethical. Okay. Our current system.
I think I remember you telling me that not only that, but also even if she watched that movie or she knew what was happening in that movie, she told you something along the lines like, this is not what's happening here in Japan. Mostly.
Right, yes, good. That's correct. She says, well, those undercover videos are filmed in the States, and I suspect the Japanese don't treat animals as badly, which I have no knowledge about. I mean,
it's worse here.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's another conversation we can have.
About the States, Nadia wasn't clear cut. It's at least as bad. Sorry, but she told me that an organism who's rating the state of animal welfare in the agro-business rated the UK A and Japan D. Now, I don't know what exactly that means, but then we went through, when we discussed those things, when I talked with her last week, I think. It was 2 weeks ago. Anyways, discussed some details, right? But she's not actively trying to really look into that, right? She has more knowledge than most people. But yeah, Japan is pretty, like, animal right-wise, they're nowhere. So there's no protection at all. And even myself, when I was a consumer of meat, I would prefer to buy Japanese pork or whatever, because I had this kind of idea that is totally right. Like, it's terrible in the States, but I had no knowledge about what's happening in Japan. And so, well, I mean, you don't put energy into looking into it. So Yeah, it's quite terrible in Japan apparently. And
well, you had that perception. I could, just going by feeling, I think it's a reasonable assumption because the Japanese tend to be, in many ways, gentle people. They don't like confrontation generally, as opposed to Americans who are kind of more in your face. So, I couldn't imagine that the Japanese would be more humane. I hear it's not true, but without doing any research, I think it's not a ridiculous assumption.
I think it's so once you start, once it's a business, there's no if there's no pressure group that aims towards the welfare of those sentient beings, then there's no reason why welfare will be taken into consideration against profit.
Right.
And so once it's profit only that drives the market and the way those animals are treated, it could be here, it could be anywhere else, it's going to be as bad as it needs to be to make the most money until you find a better way to do things, and that better way is just going to be about the money, extra money you make, and not about how better or worse it is for them. If they're lucky, it's going to be less worse. If they're unlucky, it's going to be even worse. And that's the end of the thinking process in the business industry. I don't see why they would mind, especially in a country where no one's interested into looking into what's happening, right? But we also discussed, like she asked me about if I ever been to Shinagawa's slaughterhouse, because apparently there's one in Shinagawa.
Really?
Yeah. And I told her, like, I would never go there. I would never, it's like watching Earthlings or a very gross documentary, and I wouldn't do that. I started watching documentaries last June to be able to recommend some, and so I'm watching a lot of them, and those who are too graphical, I just listen to them and I don't watch them because I'm really bad with that. I don't need more convincing. I need more weapons to try and convince more people. Basically, that's why I'm watching them. Going to a slaughterhouse will not, I don't think it would give me more weapon. I like it. I think it would just like punch me in the face so many times that I would be KO'd and suffer a great deal emotionally. But if I was to do that, I would probably only consider it if it was with someone I need to convince, and I see that as a very good way to do it.
Right.
And obviously, getting that person to come with you will probably be like not possible. Like if my ex, like your wife, for different reasons, I believe, but wouldn't explore documentaries or books. Like we could talk about it. That's basically where it was long conversations, but it wouldn't be, she refused to read this book or that book. And refusing right from the start to try and understand what your partner is going through.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. Again, I don't know if I was in the same situation and I felt like my partner was not doing something sensible, how far I would go to try and stay connected or bridge the gap there, I don't know. So I am not saying they should do better, but it is definitely in a society where that's a growing trend, even in Japan, and where if put in front of most of the facts, they will agree on the fact that this is cruelty is bad, etc. I mean, it's important. I think it's important.
It's funny because I kind of pride myself on being very objective, and even politically, when I disagree with a certain political position, I really try to come up with the other side's argument. Just so, and I can see sometimes the other side's argument, whereas a lot of I'm liberal. A lot of my liberal friends can't. They just demonize the other side.
Yeah.
But this issue, I feel, is one of the most clear-cut issues I've ever dealt with. It's very little gray, and it's fascinating because the way I view a lot of things now is totally different, right? It's nothing novel or new, but when I used to see a steak in the market, I completely viewed it as a product.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a slaughtered animal. It is just like the cereal, it's just like the orange juice, and there's the steak all wrapped up in the styrofoam and the saran wrap, right? And now it's so different. I mean, that was a living creature. If you've ever spent time around cows, they're the most gentle creatures. And it's just, when I think about it now, I see all the meat as just slaughtered animals now. It's like I go to a restaurant or the market and I see all the meat.
Yeah.
I just see these are all just these animals were they probably lived a horrible life to begin with, and then they had their throats cut. It's very sad. And even like I'm from Hawaii, I used to go fishing, right? And when I think about the fish, like so now I wouldn't go fishing, even if I'm just going to throw them back.
Yeah.
Right? It's like they're suffocating out of the water.
Yeah.
They're gasping for air, right? So it just really changed so many things, and of course now it's spilling over into everything like circuses. And pet stores. And
old cafes.
Like SeaWorld.
Oh yeah.
What else? I'm missing. There's another one that I'm totally blanking on. But it just completely changes your view.
Yeah, it
of the
does.
world.
It makes those sentient beings.
Yeah.
They stop being a means to your own ends and other ends. They start being just their own end in themselves, and so it's like kind of. Obviously, we are the dominant species as far as like we can see things, right? But some people are totally comfortable with that just being enough. But
that gives us the responsibility to be better. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, and well, I mean, when you start diving into ethics and arts and what ought to be, etc., and rights, etc., it becomes very hard to convince someone who's giving a lot of thoughts about those things, and with like a philosophy major, for example. Like your philosophy major was vegan. My philosophy major is not vegan, right? In my story, and going on their turf with your feelings backed by philosophical arguments, where they've been trained to kind of do those kind of arguments there. It's pretty tough, and I think you can sum it up just at the end of the day. If you don't have to do it, why do you do it? Right? If what you're doing will bring pain and suffering to a sentient being, then that's the minimum amount of negative things, right? I'm not talking about the health, the environment, etc., right? But just like, why don't you choose the cruelty-free option, right? When you can. And I think for me that's enough. Now, some people will argue against that, saying like there's value in the happiness created through whether it's a circus or it's some food, right? And most vegan will tell you, well, I don't see how taste can justify what's being done to get that food on your plate. I think the vegan argument is stronger because it's a fleeting taste. So if you're not talking about health anymore, but just about non-mandatory taste experience, then it becomes very hard to justify just for taste. So you can start justifying with like tradition, culinary tradition, like how it brings people together. But then, if that's what you're after, you can totally redefine those. I mean, it would take time, etc. But why not, instead of having the turkey for Thanksgiving, having something else, which would make everyone happy as well? And sure, you would need a mindset change, and it is probably going to encounter a lot of resistance. But it's not like, as long as they're happy eating something tasty and that brings people together, why not, on top of all that, have something that's not out of like some horrendous process of rearing animals? And I don't see where you're losing, basically. I don't see where you're losing, and I see way less suffering at the end of the line. So,
yeah, it's very. I'm trying to think of the analogy. I guess the obvious analogy would be religion, where you were not a believer and then you became a believer, and then suddenly the whole world seems different to you. Now that's been used. People have been told me that. Oh, you're like a cult or something.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, yeah, but the difference, of course, is our religion relies on faith.
And you have dogmas.
Yeah, and I'm not basing this on faith. I'm basing this on, will I go to hell if I don't believe in Jesus Christ? You might believe that, but you can't prove it.
Yeah.
Will this animal suffer if I slit its throat? Yeah, I think we can all agree on that.
Well, actually, some people are not agreeing with that either, even that, right? So, but yeah, I see your point there. And there are no dogmas in veganism, not in the way I see veganism. Like, some vegans can go pretty far, but
see, I disagree with that a little bit. That the lack of dogmas, like so. If there was some animal, that like you've probably heard this before, like this one vegan wrote an article like vegans should eat oysters.
Okay.
Right, and he goes through okay, why are vegans vegan? He said, okay, to reduce animal suffering, environmental reasons, this and that, right? And so he applies those reasons to an oyster.
Yeah.
And he says, okay, an oyster, by all accounts, an oyster is not sentient. An oyster is not aware that
of
it's
its own existence.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know if it's true, but this is the argument he makes. An oyster feels no pain. And oysters filter the water to clean the water.
Yeah.
So if we farm oysters, it's good for the environment and there's no suffering. So I think, and of course he was attacked by a lot of vegans.
Yeah, of course.
But for me, if you could prove that a given living thing was essentially like a plant, like in terms of the standards we apply to as for like why we're vegan, I don't see why we shouldn't eat that thing.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't. That's what I'm saying, right? Like I think you get to these certain vegans become unquestioning vegans. Like, okay, I decided I'm vegan.
Cool.
Animals.
Oh, but I'm not.
No.
Like, convince me to eat meat and I'll go to yakiniku tomorrow. Like, seriously. But you're never going to be able to do that. I don't think. I think, like you, for me, being vegan, as far as diet goes and not eating animal products is the most clear-cut decision I've ever made, and that makes the most sense. And to just connect with what you said about politics, that's why I'm not invested in politics, because I had been a bit going towards that kind of, I jumped into that rabbit hole for a while and tried to make my own mind about different matters, and then I kind of gave up because I didn't know. I don't know. And like for veganism, I let's say if I have a cow or pork or a pig, in front of me, there's this you don't need to intellectualize it. It's called empathy. It works. We're born with it. and it makes sense, right? But for oysters, well, I'm lucky enough, let's say, that I don't like shells. So I'm definitely not going to be attracted to oysters or whatever mussels.
Right, but the ethical discussion, right, is what as you know, like a couple days ago, I'm trying to create this group to discuss, ethical issues related to veganism.
And health issues, as I understand it, as well. Right?
Not really. It's more we'll talk about that later.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
It's not a health issue. It's more how the health issue impacts the discussion of veganism. It's I like sort of exploring what I consider the gray areas.
Okay.
So for example, the oysters, that's one example, right?
Yeah.
Like if you could prove that the oyster doesn't feel any pain, it is not aware that it's being harvested or killed, is that okay, right?
Do you know Peter Singer's stance on that?
I don't.
So in the latest, I don't know when the latest edition of that book goes back to, but of Animal Liberation, in the first editions he was like that, like eat it if you want to. It seems like they're not suffering. By Now he's like, we don't know. Let's be cautious.
Right, but my point is, I'm just saying if you can prove it.
Yeah.
I'm saying if you can prove it, a lot of vegans will still attack you for doing it.
Oh
because they've become dogmatic.
Yeah, true.
And so that's what I disagree with you a little bit about that. I mean, it's maybe less, but it's still there.
I would have to listen to the recording, but I think I said, in the way I view veganism, there's no dogma.
Right.
And so it was really like
the way you view it.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
And
right.
and I think the way I view it is not uncommon, in the sense, like, for people who don't spend a lot of time thinking about it in general, and I mean, I'm not attacking any of those kind of vegans. It's just great to just want to be vegan and live that way. But people who are just like having a line of like, I'm not eating any animals, period, and make it a dogma, or whether it's a very strong one, or you can sway them by talking with them, and they put shells in the animal kingdom, that's fine for me. And maybe you can call that a dogma, but for me, as I said, with like convince me of eating meat, if you convince me I'm wrong, basically, and that's been the thing of like my whole adult life, especially. I'm someone who's always open to being proven wrong. Right. And so I would listen to, when I was a bit jumping into the rabbit hole of politics, etc. You know, I've read Ayn Rand, etc. I was like, yeah, fuck the state, that kind of thing. And then I was like, but wait, I like the idea. I like black and white things. I really love those. Right. I like being right, but I can't convince myself that I'm not potentially wrong. Right. So I need to look for the cracks in the armor. It's like, I read How Not to Die. I don't know if you read that book. It's a very, very interesting book. That's what made me stop oil, and I'm a bit extreme. I stole salt as well. So I'm not
oil. I'm
not eating any oil. At home, I don't have any
no
oil.
No olive oil.
No olive oil.
No oil of any sort. Okay.
No.
And no salt?
No salt.
I see. Well, you mean no added salt?
No added salt.
Right.
Yeah. When I eat out, I don't mind, but when I eat at home, I don't use those. And when I was reading the book, I was like, this is awesome. This is awesome. Like, you're convincing me of all this, but dude, I'm going to do a research on Google after I finish your book. I'm going to type How Not to Die debunked and see what comes up. I think I did it maybe twice. I didn't find anything conclusive. So if any listeners have a good debunking of some of these arguments, go ahead. But I think it's pretty bulletproof on a lot of points. I mean, 1/5 of his book is like references to scientific papers, and he's a doctor himself.
I would not mind reading that book.
I definitely recommend you read the book. It's actually, as far as I know, and I'm discussing this matter quite a lot with my father. My father's not vegan. But on my 35th birthday, when I kind of decided to be vegan, it wasn't yet. It kind of was. But anyways, I asked my close family to read Animal Liberation. That was my birthday present. Read the book, come back to me, let's have a discussion. Right? I'm sneaky like that.
Great idea.
I also posted on Facebook. I didn't have much as many contacts as I have now, but I posted like excerpts of the book and asked people's opinion and said like, if you are curious and you want to read the book, I strongly invite you to do that. If you don't want to buy it, I'll buy it for you. I was potentially ready to buy it for like several tens of people. No one ever came to me. I have one family member in the States who read it.
Animal Liberation?
Yeah. It's not the best book to read nowadays with a lot of other options, but that's a book I stumbled upon myself, and it's known as the classical book for like animal condition in the civilized world, like about experiments on the one hand, diet on the other, and then everything related to ethics there. But for how not, so I had my father read that. He expressed his views after reading it a month maybe later after I asked that on Skype. So we talked, and I was surprised to hear him tell me that he was agreeing that it wasn't acceptable and the way things were, and so he was going to reduce his meat consumption. But he thought that a lot, like veganism was extreme. I think he still thinks it's extreme. But then something like a year later, and after several discussions, I asked again, same people close to me to watch some documentaries, one of which is very short, from Farm to Fridge. You might know this one. It's 12 minutes of basically, I haven't watched Earthlings, but it's probably close to what Earthlings is showing, but it's in 12 minutes.
Much shorter though.
Yeah, which makes it more palatable, if you can use that word for that kind of videos. But and so he watched that, and that just was like terrible for him. And he was like, this is not, like, you can't justify any of that, right? Really not at all. And he still wouldn't change much. And we actually discussed that when he had started reading How Not to Die, which I stumbled on a bit randomly. I knew about the book, but I wasn't interested, and I kind of decided to give it as a present for his wife, thinking like the health matter, the health approach would resonate more there. And he started reading it, and then when we talked about it, I don't think he finished it yet, actually, because it's pretty redundant. So it goes in circles at some point. I read all of it, and he told me, I am aware myself of my feelings regarding my diet when reading that book compared to when considering the ethical things. And like, although the ethical part of it, I found it totally unacceptable and like it's terrible. I don't feel like moving much. But when I read about how much more healthy I could be on the plant-based diet, it makes me want to go more plant-based. And so I think he acted, at least at that time, he acted upon those words and started considering more animal products-free food choices. I don't know if it changed much right now, but it's a book that that's why I'm watching a bunch of different documentaries, way less recently, but it's to have different weapons for different people.
Right. So actually, about the health issue, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer like 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay.
And so she was treated. She's fine now. But right after she was finishing her chemo regimen, I happened to be in Hawaii on vacation, and she had an appointment with her oncologist, and I said, I want to talk to him. So we went to his office, and he checked my mother out, and then I asked him, I said, what's the one thing, now that she's through with her treatment, what's the one thing she can do to minimize the chance of a recurrence? And I expected him to give, a non-committal answer, like, well, it's hard to say. It depends on. He just said, eliminate animal protein from your diet.
Awesome.
That's what and he's not vegan either, right? And I was just so surprised because you rarely get that kind of unequivocal answer from a professional. Usually there's a lot of qualifications. Well, it's hard to say because they don't want to be pinned down. If she gets a recurrence, of course, I might go blame him and say, hey, you said this and that. But that's what he said, and it was just that's it.
Yeah.
Stop. And if it had come from me, my mother might be thinking, well, of course you're going to say that. You're vegan. You're trying to make me vegan, right? But her doctor said that. So she cut down. She's not vegan, but she cut down like a lot. And it's 3 years later, she's still okay. But I just thought that was very interesting. Now I know there's a lot of issues related to health. See, this is where I'm like, for your father, right? The health issue is more persuasive than the ethics, right? For me, it's the reverse, because at least what I read before was that it's better to have, I should say, it is easier to have a healthy diet if you have some animal products in your diet rather than zero. Right? Like they say, like salmon is healthy.
Like everything with omega-3s and B12 and blah, 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 right?
So I think, at least when I read before, if you eat a meat-heavy diet, that's not good. But if you eat it, if you eat a little bit.
So the ideal diet would be with animal products. That's what
That's what I read.
Right.
Okay. So I don't know if that's true, but that's what I read, and that's why for me, the health reason is not persuasive.
Right. So you became vegan and you started eating in a way that you from what you knew at the time, or even maybe now, you thought to be less ideally, like less healthy than if you had some animal products. So you made kind of a sacrifice in potential health for sticking to what you believe to be the most ethical way.
Yes. Yes, correct.
Yeah.
And I think some people think that's, some people would consider that insane. But if you turn it around, and there's that famous, I think it was in that book too that Nadia gave me, the Mind If Art of the Cheeseburger. It's the one about the puppies. Have you heard of this?
I haven't read the book though.
No, so. But have you heard of this little hypothetical?
No.
So I'm probably going to get it wrong, but it's something like, imagine that you had an accident. And you had a brain injury or something, and it killed the part of your brain that allowed you to taste chocolate.
Okay.
And chocolate was your favorite food.
You
can taste everything else though. And you discover that if you torture and kill puppies, they will produce this chemical that if you take it, will allow you to enjoy the taste of chocolate again.
Mm-hmm.
So, is it ethical to torture and kill puppies to allow you to taste the chocolate again, to enjoy the chocolate again? No, that's not really a health issue, but but you can easily
translate that to a health issue.
It's like okay, what if killing and torturing and killing puppies produced a chemical that allowed you to reduce your cholesterol level by 10%,
or allow you to live 10 years longer? I think it becomes a gray area when you put in certain probably totally unrealistic scenarios, like the one I just said, right? Like basically, I'm the same as you. I didn't choose this because it was the healthiest, and I would still do it if it wasn't healthy. But I just met a friend this lunch, and we talked a bit about this, and I said that as far as I'm concerned, I would still stick to a vegan diet even if it was unhealthy. But to a certain, there's a spectrum there. At some point, I will try to reintroduce animal products. So let's say it's so unhealthy that it impacts your life in ways that are proven, and that it's so big that I think as a society, we then ought to find alternative products. But in the meantime, it doesn't help to be weak and etc. Right? So I think there's a spectrum there. I wouldn't have a clear-cut answer. I don't think we're ever going to be facing that problem anyway. So it's a bit like kind of, oh, you're that kind of vegan. I don't agree with your values, right? It's just going to create division within the vegan community, let's say. But as far as I understand it, and after having read How Not to Die and having listened to a lot of video footage, etc., and even when you listen to testimonies of vegan top athletes, there's more and more of them. Apparently, maybe, but for some exceptions, granted, and again, I'm not knowledgeable in that area, but 100% plant-based diet is apparently the most efficient one and the best fuel that you can have. And if it's whole foods especially, right? The closest you get to whole food, plant-based diet that is balanced in nutrients, the best fuel you have for your body. And does that mean that you can't live long and a healthy life on a diet that is partly animal product based? No, that doesn't. But you have to look at averages and see how it impacts on average the life of people, and also how in our current society, like in the West, especially in the States, like the amount of I think the life expectancy just decreased, right?
It decreased.
Decreased. It's awesome. It's awesome in the wrong way.
Yeah, but of course
they're
saying it's because of drug overdoses and suicides.
Well, I don't know. I haven't looked into it, but if that's what the general opinion says, it's crazy. But
you know, the American diet is not good.
No, and I mean, it's just like you don't have to go full steam vegan diet to increase your chances of living a healthy life, and in French we say quand la santé va tout va. I think you have that in every culture. Like when health is there, like you can. Like everything is okay, basically. That's what it means, right? And I've always been pretty healthy, and I think that my current diet and lifestyle in general, because it's not only food, right? It's a lot of other things as well. It just allows me to be as active as I am, and I really think there's no compromises to make as far as health goes when you start considering plant-based diets. And the most plant-based and whole food diets you consider, the healthier you might get.
Do you take vitamin B12 supplements?
I get my blood work done. I have one result. I got it done twice, my blood work. So because I want to show as many people as possible how healthy I am, and use that as one of the weapons to kind of, one of the ways to reach people and to convince people. I'm definitely going to be as convincing as a guy like Nimai Delgado, like vegetarian since ever, like when he was born already because of his parents, and then vegan for years and top bodybuilder. But I can still show a more healthy and active life than a lot of people have. And make this and relate this to my diet. So I get checked for B12, and I get checked for protein, and for a lot of things that they don't check at the regular school blood work test.
I did not know you could get checked for B12.
You can, and there's actually 4 different ways to check for B12, and B12 is a complicated thing because of how, as far as I understand it, your reserves can deplete without effects showing up until it's too late. And the effects can be lifelong, even after you recover. So you don't want to, but on the other hand, I talked with a few friends recently, two of which have been on the podcast, and they've been vegan. One of them has been vegetarian almost his whole life, and vegan maybe 6 or 7 years. The other has been vegan. She's been vegan like 8 years, and
Saudi?
only started. No. Not Saudi's been less than that.
Okay.
And starting taking B12 only a few months ago because she wasn't aware of it. And I think it's not something that's well known if you don't look into it or you don't read it, right? But I think it's not controversial to say, like, because that was one of the things you brought up on the Facebook group you created for having those discussions in the future. And I didn't answer in detail, but one of the people you reached out to did, and if it, like, in effect, like B12 is supplemented for animals as well, and it would be, from what I understand, the way society became way too clean for us to live in, that the bacteria that are like need to be there for B12 to be in our diet are disappearing from our plate. So we're eating too clean, right? And so you can have an animal product diet, and depending on where your products come from and how they're supplemented B12, you can be lacking B12. But I think there's, as long as you get your blood work done by someone who you trust to a reasonable degree, and you check for like those specific elements that usually vegan are attacked on, like iron, B12, protein, red blood cells, and you get good results. That's why I'm going to put them online. I've done that with my first blood test. I'm going to show numbers and say, hey, guess what? I'm only plants. I don't have any problems.
So I think the at the meetup, after the meetup at the Pink Cow, the new Pink Cow, that we were talking at the station at the end. So I mentioned this Welsh girl named Abby. Yeah.
Working at Hem Cafe, right?
Right.
I have to get in touch with her.
She, I think I told you this, but so she has this theory about B12 which she fully admits.
I haven't heard that story.
Okay. So I was texting her and about because she's been a lifelong vegan.
You told me that. Yeah.
So I think she's like in her mid-20s now.
Yeah.
So I asked her, so do you take vitamin B12 supplements? And she said, no, never, right? And I said, well, you're aware that some experts say vegans should take B12 supplements because, it's harder to get it in plants. Or impossible in some cases. And her theory, and she admits it's just a feeling, is that she thinks that if you've never gotten B12 from animal products, like she's never gotten B12 from animal products, your body gets more efficient at getting it from wherever it can, versus if your body is used to getting it from animal products and then stops, it doesn't know how to either process it.
I see.
And so therefore she thinks she's fine.
Well, I have no knowledge to really sufficient enough to give an opinion about this. I wouldn't be surprised if this is just wishful thinking.
Right.
But as I said to a friend, like the friend I've met this lunch, right now at this moment, after reading How Not to Die, I haven't looked up if it had been debunked in some ways or not, and listened to other specialists that have the same, bring up the same facts, etc., about supplementation and also about how animal products are not good for you, period. And you'd better get the equivalent in the plant products and you'd be healthier. I put my trust in what the author of the book, Dr. Greger, writes and says and has on his website, like nutritionfacts.org. That's very comprehensive, and you can type like keywords and see what he's saying about this. It changed some ways in which I was eating, namely oil, salt. I'm having way more spices, like turmeric and that kind of stuff. I'm having more, some of the greens I was having lesser quantities, I'm having more of them, etc. So I'm being more aware of that, and I'm open to being proven wrong again. But apart from being a specialist yourself and being able to parse through all the literature, you have to give your confidence, to put your trust into some one or some group of person.
Right.
And
I mean, you're never going to be an expert on everything, so
Yeah.
you just have to do your own research,
Yeah.
and as you do, see if it's been debunked,
yeah.
and make your decisions.
Yeah, and there I think like I was talking with some friends recently, and they were saying like I'm choosing like the science, the facts are gonna help convince more people, and I was saying yes, but there's never gonna be a clear-cut consensus about health matters from facts, because facts can be debated on how you got them through which kind of surveys or studies. What you can difficultly give an argument against is people standing in front of you and proving they're alive, they're healthy, they're top performers, and they're vegan. And that's why I think the vegan athlete community has a big role to play.
Yeah, right.
Because each time I'm being asked about protein, which doesn't happen often, but in Japan it happens, right? When you go to places where there's non-vegan coming to you and they're Japanese and they ask you, but you look pretty good in shape, or how are you getting protein? So, like from this and that, and if you don't trust what you're seeing right now, guess that bodybuilder, he's vegan and never ate meat in his entire life. And of course, then you can have people who would say like, yeah, I don't trust the fact that you're vegan. Maybe you're just hiding or taking powders or whatever, right? But that's going like very far. My point was, more than facts, give me examples.
Right.
Like, if you give me facts about how impossible it is to walk on water, for example, to go religious here, but you have a panel of people walking on water, I'll still be not believing most of it, but at least like I've seen it, right?
Right.
But here, if you're telling me both on paper that health is potentially improved by eating plants and you can be strong, etc., but on top of that you show top performers that are, it all goes in the same direction. And then you have witnesses that have like recovered from heart disease and diabetes and cancer, and it all goes in the same direction, right? And then you have to dig or to really be nitpicky to find the ones that are like, whenever there's an accident, someone dies and then they relate that to being vegan or whatever, it makes the news because, of course, it's because they're vegan that they had this and this and that. But yeah, I think, to reach out to people, facts about diet are not always enough because of the lack of consensus already within specialists.
Well, I agree with you that image is important. And so like that woman I told you about, the Welsh woman.
Yeah.
So she's kind of a model.
Oh, is she?
Yeah. She does modeling,
Like
on the side.
working at Hem Cafe?
Yeah. So I was texting her and I said, you know what? It's very important that you be able to show people, not explain, but just show people that, hey, look at me. Like I am a healthy-looking, attractive woman,
Person,
and
yeah.
I'm vegan. I'm trying to find her
Pictures?
Her picture, yeah, and then and then even with me, I'm most people say I'm much younger. I look much younger than my real age.
Okay.
And I don't think it's because I'm vegan, but if people want to think that, well, I think it can hurt, obviously. I think eating like way too much meat it taxes your body.
Yeah.
But, I just say, let people make the association if they want to, right? I mean, my wife also says, vegans, her image of vegans was that they're these skinny, unhealthy looking, pale, people. And, her explanation for me is, well, you grew up eating a lot of meat. That's why it's important to have that base. Yeah,
vegan bodybuilders get the same thing when they're vegan or vegetarian recently and had been eating meat. So usually they get that, you built your muscles on meat and then you maintain it. but then you meet the guy who's been vegetarian his whole life, and you're like, okay, I'm running out of arguments here.
Yeah, no, I want to see that that bodybuilder you're talking about.
Just
vegan bodybuilder.
Yeah, Nima Delgado. I can bring it up here. I mean, he has a tremendously well-balanced physique, and I think he's looking too much like a child, though, his face. But if I was a girl, I wouldn't be into him at all. And I'm a sucker for shredded guys as far as like aesthetic goes. Yeah, she's pretty. Extremely beautiful eyes on that picture. Huh.
Yeah, so put her on your list. She's
For the podcast, you mean, or like for?
Yeah, well, whatever list you want.
I don't have lists actually. Even my podcast list is like kind of a work in progress, and I don't have any other lists. Yeah, where is it gonna be? Nimai.
Is that for real?
Yeah.
That looks like it's been photoshopped.
No.
Is he part Asian?
I don't know.
He looks like he's part Asian.
He's insanely good looking as far as muscle goes.
Wow.
And plus he's an engineer to begin with, so he's smart.
Nimai Delgado.
Yeah.
American.
Yeah. And he made the cover of a very famous magazine like Men's and Fitness or something like that. And he tells the story of that. He has a podcast, Generation V. He has the voice of a kid, so it's kind of funny, but he has very interesting people on. And that's the podcast this one and the Ritual podcast that really made me want to do my own. Because although I knew a lot of podcasts before that, and listening to them, the format they have, like Ritual, and especially Nimai always starts with, tell me your story, what brought you to veganism. And so he had, this podcast left a very, it's very worth listening to. It's the story of a guy who used to work as a butcher in a butchery for a section of a chain of stores, a big chain of stores. And so he would it's a grueling job, and he was talking about how his colleagues were all heavily drinking and having health issues and everything because of how insanely unhealthy mentally and physically it was, and also talking about the pieces of meat that end up in the plastic wrappings that you just cover up with all the gross things that the ground beef and gosh. And he explains psychologically how he was down deep in this pit of misery and to some gradual improvement. I don't remember exactly the details, but he ends up being on that podcast and being a figure of veganism, and that's a story that you listen to and you're like, oh shit, I haven't lived anything as crazy as that, right?
Let me ask you something. So, if you had, if you had rats in your house, what would you do about them?
The rats, I don't know, because they're rats, right? But I'm trying to catch my insects when I have them, so I sometimes failed, especially cockroaches. They're fast, and the way I try to catch them is sometimes if I failed, it's a bit lethal, they get cut in half.
So you try not to kill them?
Oh yeah.
I see.
Yeah. I get a first reaction of disgust with some insects, some none. Like spiders, when I was a kid, I hated them, but now I found them cute. I mean, obviously spiders you find here, not talking about crazy, insane big spiders. Cockroaches, like most people, I just get a visceral reaction of disgust. But here they're not too big, and I didn't get thousands of them at the same time. So when it's 1, 2, or maybe even 3, I don't want to sleep in the same room.
Right.
But I try to catch them, definitely. Mosquitoes, I haven't had much recently. I don't kill them anymore. But if I hear a mosquito in my ear, I will just tap my ear or whatever. So I might kill them.
See, rats, I'm not there yet. I'm not there, and you can use the necessity argument, I think,
true.
here, and it's it is necessary for me to kill this cockroach in order for me to to enjoy living in my house.
Well,
And,
but is it
you know,
is it necessary for you to enjoy living in your house?
At this point, it is. It is.
Because
Yeah.
no, I'm saying that because I vividly recall listening to, I think it was a podcast, I really don't remember who it was nor which podcast it was. It was a long time ago, like maybe 3-4 years ago. And it was a woman who had been, if she was telling her story of like living a few months, if not a couple years, in what's the name of that country? Burma? Teaching English in a small village, and how that was the happiest time of her life because of how the quality of the connections you build with the people, like compared to how superficial her life had been in the city and etc. But she was living in a hut because she didn't want to live in different ways than other people around her, in a hut, and there were cockroaches running all over the place. And you learn to live with cockroaches running all over the place, even when you sleep or whatever, right? And I don't want to do that, but I think I'm never gonna be in a place in my life where, or I actively try to avoid that, where I take things as normal and granted, like, oh, a place with like, I don't know, that looks gross or whatever. I still realize that it's such an improvement on what others have, and that brings perspective. Now, as far as killing cockroaches, well, yeah, I try to catch them. It's actually pretty fun to try and catch them. And so I catch them. I even posted a picture on my Facebook profile 6, 7, maybe 8 months ago of a cockroach under or inside a Tupperware, right? So what I do is that, yeah, I take a Tupperware, I put it on top of it, try to catch it, and then from there, I have either I put a piece of paper under it,
right,
and then I release them outside, or I take the lid if it's on table, whatever. But again, I remember my father could tell stories about cockroaches invading our house in Texas when I used to live there with my family when I was very, very little, so I don't remember any of it.
You lived in Texas?
Yeah, between 2 and 5.
Oh, interesting.
And he has stories about cockroaches over there. It's not the same league of cockroaches than here.
Well, the reason I bring up the rats is because I think it was before I was even pescatarian. And this goes to the slaughterhouse thing.
Yeah.
So I remember, I mean, it's how you can get so desensitized so quickly. So I remember, so I had rats in my house in Hawaii.
Okay. Yeah.
And I put out the glue traps.
Yeah.
You're familiar with the glue traps?
Not much, but
it's like a big piece of sticky paper, and you put the food in the middle, and then the rat goes in the sticky paper, and they can't move.
okay.
And so what most people do, apparently, or a lot of people, I shouldn't say most, is they just throw the sticky paper in the trash. And of course, the rat has no food or water, so they basically dehydrate.
Oh.
And it's apparently dehydration is one of the more painful ways to die, right?
Yeah.
So I did that, and I thought, okay, I should be humane, and I should quickly kill the rat.
Yeah.
Before I throw it away.
Yeah.
And so I just said, I'm going to drown the rat.
Oh.
It takes about a minute.
Oh.
So the first time I did it, I had a bucket, and I felt so bad. I was like, oh my God. But I did it because what's the alternative?
Yeah.
So I stuck it in the water, and of course it was thrashing around, and it took about a minute, and it died. Right? And I felt so bad. I felt like throwing up, right? But guess what? The next time I did it, I felt half as bad.
Yeah.
And by the 10th time I had done it, it was almost like nothing. I was like, okay, I got the rat, stick it in the water, 1 minute, he's dead. But that's how it works, I think.
Oh,
like
totally.
you have to, you can't keep being traumatized.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a completely different issue with the slaughterhouses because there's, again, to what extent the videos we see are the worst of?
I don't think they are.
I don't know. I'm just saying I don't know, right? I mean, clearly it happens. I think it's commonplace. whether or not these undercover activists discard 90% of the footage because it's just the workers are treating them. I don't know, right?
I think to work in such conditions, you have to pay such a heavy toll mentally and emotionally that if it doesn't attract already people who are susceptible to enjoy treating vulnerable beings with violence, it definitely makes a lot of those workers fall into that trap just to cope with the pain, right? And even if that wasn't the case, even if they work as best as they can in the most human way they can, like the rate at which they have to kill the animals prevents any kind of less cruel killing. Like it's not optimized to minimize cruelty or suffering. It's optimized for profit. And there are some laws here and there, depending on where you are in the world, that makes it necessary for them to stun the animal, but it's often apparently not efficient enough, whether it's that or it's other ways to kill, right? Or when you're the cow or whatever who's waiting its turn in the line to get killed, and you smell the blood and you hear the screams and really? And that's humane slaughter, dude? Yeah. Like, what? No, it's like, even if it was perfect, a perfect slaughterhouse is still a house of horrors in my book. And maybe I'm living in a world that's too easy on me or on everyone, and I should man up or whatever, or if I was living in another period of time, I would be desensitized and but I think the way things happen in our current society, whatever the way you look at it, is unhealthy because of how you have this disconnect between the product and the animal. And if you had at least a connection like I imagine there was in the past, a long time in the past, for example, but for the longest time in human history, where people who would eat animal products, most people who could afford it, would know exactly where it comes from.
Right.
Like the life was very different, right? You would have less of a disconnect, and I think it's healthier to take ownership of the reality of things, rather than to be ignorant of it. And whenever for some circumstances you become aware of it to some extent, you have to choose between keeping your eyes open or turning them away, and it makes for a very challenging decision to make. I mean, opening your eyes and keeping them open, looking at that, as we said, you need a certain stability in your life, etc., usually, to really go there. But it's harder probably than just what was in the past, like knowing that the chicken in your backyards, if you had some, or the pig here and there, or whatever, like you made the relation between the food and the animals, and I think that's necessary.
You you believe eating animal products even a little bit is unhealthy? Is that your current position?
If I trust what Dr. McGregor is putting forward in his book, it appears to be the case.
Okay.
Yeah. And I believe it to be unethical as well. So I'm 100%.
Well, what I was going to ask was, like, what if a tree falls in the forest and hits a deer and kills the deer?
Yeah, I've been asked that by my ex as well.
Yeah. Like, what? How do we analyze that, right?
I mean, it depends. If you don't need to eat it, but if you need to eat it to survive, it's different, right?
No, you don't need to eat it. It's just like, well, it's going to just rot in the.
It's not. And like life is going to take over it. There's a lot of other living things that are going to benefit from it. Why would I eat it if I have other options?
Would you consider it ethical though?
No, that's what I was going towards. I'm almost 100% in line with Peter Singer's take on like not being species. So considering every sentient species and beings as an end in and of itself, herself, himself, or whatever grammar you use. And again, I realize I might just be an individual that has lived in a very fortunate environment, and that I have like this kind of soft spot, and I'm like naive or whatever. But I definitely believe that a society that would be striving economically and morally would be better off being vegan in that sense of the word, in the sense like not treating other species as
food
products.
Right. So I guess the analogy you might make would be, if some person was killed by the tree, you wouldn't eat them because we don't believe you should be eating.
I don't see a difference.
Right.
Between eating from a, well, I do see a difference from a cultural and social perspective between eating humans and eating animals, non-human animals. But I don't see the difference at a basic level of ethics. I mean, and then if, for example, the deer is killed by the tree or the human or whatever, and it is thought to be healthier to eat animal products, then yeah, go ahead, right? Make that death count, right? But if it's not healthier, and I mean, I'm not 100% for health. I'm drinking alcohol from time to time. I don't believe that alcohol has any benefits whatsoever, health-wise. And I choose to do so. I choose to do so just because I enjoy it. And I really don't drink often at all. So let's say that I think the facts that say meat is not healthy, whatever the case, are true, but there's still that deer that's dead, and I have no ethical problem with eating the deer already dead. I would not mind eating it just as a treat, for example, if I love it, right? But I think I'm less and less attracted to, and more attracted to non-meat options as well.
I just like exploring these questions. You know, it's like in law school when the professor gives you all these. There's a case that actually happened, and then you discuss the case, and then the professor throws all these hypos at you. Okay, what about if the defendant was blah blah blah, right? So that's what I like doing. It's like.
But what about you then?
I think logically I would consider it ethical, but at some point you just get so used to the lifestyle of not eating meat that you associate it with being unethical, and it's like that part of the instinctive part of you takes control more than the logical part. That's how I would explain it.
You don't have to go through the effort of making a decision at each time once you interiorize those values, and if need be, you can explain and try to split hairs and really go deep down and try to think about those kind of problems, fictional problems. But I think I wouldn't want to eat what was a sentient being, and then of course we haven't discussed that, and I suggest we don't, because it's a rabbit hole as well. But everything related to plants, and whether it's if science was to show that they're potentially more complex living things that we tend to believe, where do you go ethically there?
I'm glad you brought that up, because it's the last thing I want to say before I have to go. But
but I have a few quick fire questions though. But go ahead.
The guy that the philosophy major that made me vegan, I met up with him this past summer.
All right.
We discussed this issue of plants, because people, to me, like amazingly, people bring up this issue, which I think is a bullshit argument. But say, what about plants? Plants are alive. Yeah. Plants are So my friend, his name is John Dang. He provided me with what I thought was the simplest, most elegant response. And he says, look, Darcy, why are you vegan? I assume it's to minimize suffering.
Yeah.
I say, yes. He goes, okay, then even if you can prove that plants are aware of something, even if you can, they're obviously less aware than animals. And if you can't eat animals because they're alive, and you can't eat plants because they're alive, then I'm going to suffer. I know I'm going to suffer. I'm going to starve to death and I'm going to die. So to minimize suffering, I need to eat that plant. Because I am minimizing suffering by eating the plant. Because if humans cannot eat plants, then we all suffer and we all die. And that is a way to make it consistent. And I thought, wow, that is a brilliant argument.
Really? Then I would come with an argument about how do you measure suffering?
Well, I mean, again, I'm assuming that, so the only way that, to me, that argument fails is if you can prove that plants suffer as much or more than animals. And,
it's again.
And otherwise, I think that argument is bulletproof.
Well, I have other interesting thoughts exercise that I will borrow from what I understood of what Sam Harris talks about regarding those topics. If ever we get together in a group to talk about those kind of things. But since you, and that's going to be for another day, but since you have to leave soon, I'll just like to ask you a few really...
Fire away.
Yeah, and I'm not supposed to intervene and give my opinions on those so that we can go forward. On a scale of 0 to 10, how weird are you?
How weird?
Yeah.
10 being the weirdest, of course. 4.
Okay, how so? Quickly.
I'm a contrarian.
Okay.
Often, and I love sort of being different, but not for difference sake. Like I love it when I'm legitimately different.
Okay.
Not artificially different, and to the extent that makes me weird, I guess that's why I'm a 4, because I'm not overtly weird, but I think in many ways I'm not what I seem. So if you just meet me and you look at me, you're like, oh, you have all these assumptions, but actually I think a lot of your assumptions are wrong.
I see. What are you not very good at?
Public speaking, sports, quick thinking. It's true. I'm a deep thinker, not a quick thinker.
All right.
Yeah.
Are you curious about anything right now? Like right now, you have a few hours of free time. You're energized enough so that you want to look into something. What is it?
I want to look into more into the vitamin B12 issue.
All right. Got it. And on top of your head, your favorite 3 vegan eat out places. They can be vegan friendly. Let's not be too restrictive.
Einsof Journey.
All right.
The one in Shinjuku,
yeah.
Sanchome. Everybody says teas tantan, but I don't consider that one of the...
I'm not a ramen guy, don't ask me.
Well, it's interesting because I don't know why that gets so... I mean, the way I judge this, by the way, is food that is difficult to make vegan, and yet the restaurant... Ramen is not that hard to make vegan. That's why I don't... Yeah. So Einsof for its... have you had the tiramisu?
I've had the pancakes.
Oh, that's good too.
Yeah, they're too expensive, but they're good.
I would say Taiwan Shokudo for the price, because it's unbelievably cheap and really good. And oh God, number 3, it's hard. Give me some. Oh no, I like teas. The not the teas tantan, but the teas.
The one in Juga.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. How can people reach you, like just to end here, if they want to ask you something about what we discussed, or they're curious about your insights about something? If there's no way to reach you, it's fine as well. I mean, you don't have to be public, but...
I would say you can reach me through you.
That works. I hope there's not tons of people who have questions for you, because if not, I'm going to be busy at some point. All right. Well, thanks a lot for 2 hours of talking, my longest podcast so far. And
well, not surprising, because when we get together, we're always talking, you and me.
Yes. And I look forward to maybe another one at some point in the future, and also
Absolutely.
to that kind of vegan think tank thing that you're wanting to organize.
Yeah, I definitely want to do that. So when you get back from your trip, have a great trip, by the way.
Thanks.
You leave the day after tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then you get back next
Yeah,
month.
I'm going to explore vegan Paris for the first time in my life. I've lived there 3 years. I wasn't vegan, so I've heard all good things.
Really?
Yeah, it's number 2 or 3 on the Happy Cow list of vegan cities now.
Because, I think it's the same, right? I think people have this image of French food as just like vegan unfriendly.
I didn't say I'm going to explore vegan French food. I'm going to vegan Paris.
Right.
Which can be totally different.
Right.
It's like here, there's some vegan Japanese food, but when you explore vegan Tokyo, you have a lot of burgers and stuff like that, right? Yeah. So I'm going to do that, among other things. I have a pretty heavy schedule with play, and I have to put some work in there.
Okay, well, I had a good time.
All right, awesome.
Thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure. Have a great rest of the evening, and until next time. Thank you for listening to the ciplantgo podcast. Ciplantgo is also on Instagram and Facebook at ciplantgo. There you can have a look at the latest things going on in my plant-based life in Japan. There is also an email address, ciplantgo@gmail.com. Feel free to send me a message, whether it's to ask a question, give me suggestions for ciplantgo, or anything else. Have a great rest of the day, and until next time.